yo, what's up? Primo here, and welcome to my 2022 end of the year recap. Really been looking forward to this one. It has been an eventful year, to say the least. And I know what y'all are thinking. This isn't my usual room. This is my parents', in fact. So, I actually started living on my own not too long ago, and I came back to visit them for Christmas, like this past Thursday. Excuse me, sorry. I was supposed to leave Monday, but if you've been checking up on current events, you'll see that Southwest Airlines has canceled like 70% of their flights, and I was one of the ones who was denied a ride home, so I had to switch over to a different airline, and I'm hoping to get out of here by Friday, but yeah, who knows. But hopefully I will be home by then, and yeah, I'll be able to get back to my own life, because yeah, I really gotta get back to work, and there's so many peeps back home I've kind of left behind, so yeah, I gotta get back to them and my own life, so yeah. But back to the video. Of course, I'll be doing my usual routine, covering all the video games I've played, been wanting to play, or tried to play, and of course, stuff to look forward to in the future, but at the same time, I also, be adding, stuff that's been going on in my own life, just for, spice of variety and all that, if it's alright. So, yeah, guys, with that said out of the way, let's get right into it. So, right about when this year kicked off and I had 2021 done and dusted, I was wondering what to play next for my channel. I'm always wanting to get started, get things going for the new year. I was kind of stumped at the time because all the really big titles that were coming out this year were a ways off, so I was I had a hard time figuring out what there could be that was, fun to play and would look awesome on my channel. I got the Ghost of Tsushima Iki Island DLC a while back in 2021, not too long after its release, and I hadn't gotten around to it yet, and I had thoughts on doing that first, but before I did, I came across the fact that Deltarune Chapter 2 was on the PlayStation Store, and that in of itself was a major surprise to me. Like the Iki Island DLC for Ghost of Tsushima, it was a game that released later in 2021. I really had not expected to see it so soon, especially since it took quite a while for the first chapter to get on the other platforms as well. To become available on the other platforms, that is. My bad. Given the fact that Toby Fox has had his development with his games so spread out for a span of 3 years, I really wasn't all that excited at first until I looked deeper into it, and my... how should I put it? Admiration for his new series shot back up. I can definitely say that this game was the perfect example of what a sequel should be, whether it's video games, movies, or whatever really. New characters that were extremely likable, and proper development for those who weren't so likable in the previous iteration, proper evolution of the story, and implementation of exciting new game mechanics. All while getting some answers that shed some light on the mysteries and questions we had from the previous game, while at the same time not giving away too much. So for those who don't know, Deltarune is supposedly the spiritual successor to Toby Fox's Undertale 6 years ago. It's also supposedly a sequel to his masterpiece that we've all come to adore since the mid-2010s. It has all the same characters with a few new ones here and there, but it's a completely different universe. And there's quite a theory behind that connection, but you'll have to play the genocide route in Undertale to fully see it. Let's just say alternate timelines and universes came to fruition, and... not fruition, came to light in that pathway. So let's talk about the game itself now, shall we? The latest iteration in the Deltarune series, to be exact. The goal and premise remains the same as the first game. Find the excess fountain of darkness and shut it down. But as we do this, the overarching story of Deltarune evolves further and further, given each of the different adventures the main crew has. Aside from stopping the dark fountains and their creators, the grounded relationships between the characters evolve further and further. And there's also the secret goal of having to break your own script. You see, in Deltarune, they really bear down on the idea that your choices are not your own. You have to follow the story and your character to the letter. But there may have to come a point where you have to break free from all that, given the secret bosses and quests and such. I can definitely say that Deltarune Chapter 2 is indeed a step in the right direction for this series, and a very solid start to my channel this year. So after defeating Deltarune Chapter 2, I finally decided to to resume my initial plan of getting around to Ghost of Tsushima's Iki Island DLC. You know, before it released, I was really curious on what this DLC had in store for us. Because the base game was a masterpiece in of itself. Both it and its ending. The Mongols were defeated, Jin brought peace to his homeland while sacrificing his honor and family. What more could we possibly need or want? Well, when it came out, it gave us all something we wanted a little more of, and something I overlooked entirely. Expansion on Jin Sakai's background, regarding his past and his father. So as a quick refresher, Jin's father, Kazumasa Sakai, was a powerful and well-respected samurai warrior. He died at the hands of common bandits, and Jin watched the whole thing happen. And since then, Jin has been beating himself up and carrying the guilt and pain of not being able to save his father. The Iki Island expansion expands a little bit more upon that tale, while also acting as an epilogue to the main game. While cleaning up the remaining Mongols, Jin hears tales of an upcoming resurgence of them from Iki Island, fueled by darn it, I can't speak for. I'm sorry, guys. An enigmatic shaman known as the Eagle, who roosts on Iki Island, the same place where Jin lost his father. Many years ago, when Jin was still a child, he and his father and their entire clan ventured off to Iki Island on a very important mission. To bring this untamed land of bandits and raiders under Japanese law and order. Back then, Jin was still under his father's tutelage, learning to be a warrior under him before he started learning under his uncle, Lord Shimura. Apparently, this mission and the actions Jin's father took on that island are what got him killed in the first place. Their tactics were brutal, cutting down so many who lived on that island. Eventually, the bloodshed was finally enough to fuel the raiders' lust for revenge. They lured Jin's father and his men into an ambush and were able to kill him. When Jin arrives on Iki in the present day, he must confront his past in the most darkest way possible. The Eagle subjects him to her sacred medicine, the very thing that she's been using to empower the remaining Mongols. Those who survive it are presumably healed by it, but it is truly nothing more than a curse. Those who succumb to it are driven mad by the visions they face and eventually die. Along his journey on the island, Jin must walk through hallucinations, forcing him to relive his past. Eventually, Jin meets a raider named Tenzo and joins forces with his group to hopefully liberate them from the Eagle's talons and save Tsushima once more. Throughout the journey, Jin begins to question whether or not what they did in the past was right. Eventually, Jin learns that Tenzo is the very man who killed his father. After difficultly putting aside their differences, they work together to take down the Eagle in one final assault. Finally being able to overcome his past, Jin is able to take down the Eagle and save Iki and Tsushima, and bury the hatchet with the raiders there. And ultimately find the peace that he's been looking for within himself for very long. For so long. I'm sorry guys, I cannot speak when I try and, talk to you guys on this channel like this, I swear. Well guys, in regards to this new little series, it was very fun getting back into Ghost. I really missed all the tools of the trade from the base game that I enjoyed so much. Brutal stealth kills, flaming swords and exploding arrows, poison darts, unique sword techniques, and a variety of bombs. The expansion did add a little bit more, but not a whole lot. All they did was add a new skill where you can charge through enemies with your horse. And while I can say the story in of itself was interesting, and I'm glad that they chose to expand more on Jin and his father, it just didn't feel as good as the base game. It's like they didn't really know which direction to go in regarding it. Like for majority, they keep trying to portray Jin's father as the bad guy and kind of a hard ass on his son. But on the other hand, they also show him trying to be a good, kind, caring, compassionate father that we believed him to be in the base game. Let's take a little bit of time to talk about some events that kicked off my 2022. First, let's talk about the fact that I had to go and get a new car because some chick who worked next door to me at Cracker Barrel rear-ended me and totaled my old one. Now I'm stuck making car payments worth $300, but hey, at least I got some sexy new wheels. But let me tell you something guys, it was not easy getting past this one. But at least I was able to get something nice for a very reasonable price. And to add more to my shit pile of problems, my computer also burned out. So I had to go and get a new MacBook at Best Buy. I even went on quite the journey on to fix this little issue as well. I traveled all the way to Destin, Florida, in hopes of fixing my old one, but sadly no dice, so I had to go and get a new one, and unfortunately, all the ones at the MacBook store were way outside my budget. So yeah, that's how I ended up finding the one I got at Best Buy. It has a lot less space, but it still gets the job done, which is good, I guess. And then setbacks turned to tragedy as we lost a very dear member of our family, our little bunny rabbit Mocha, whom we had since 2016 along with his sister and mate Java. I really don't like talking about the kinds of issues he had, or any issues that anyone has or anything has, but let's just say he reached that point where he just started having complications and we had to put him down. And then about 3 days later, we got a new member of the family. His name is Chai, or as we call him, Chi-Chi. I tried naming him Azrael, but my parents were having any of it. Now I know what you're thinking, living beings can't really be replaced, but when it comes to rabbits, you kind of have to have like more than one because they're social animals, and of course, you might not have a whole lot of time to spend with them solo, and so it's best for them to have company. And back to media somewhat, we kick things off with a bang regarding anime, thanks to the second part of Attack on Titan's 4th season, and its totally epic intro song, which got like #1 in the top 100 rock billboard or something like that. And on one more personal note, sadly I don't have anything to show for it, but I finally went on a date. I kind of started dating. There was this girl I met at work, her name was Rebecca. She was really, really pretty, and initially Sorry guys, one of my friends was texting me. I got a little distracted. That's why there was that weird cut. Where was I? Oh, yes, Rebecca. I met her at my job while I was working at Panera over here, where I am, or currently was, living earlier this year. Initially, back in December of 2021, I asked her if she wanted to go see Spider-Man No Way Home with me. Sadly, that never really worked out, but eventually, a little bit later, we got the chance to meet up, hang out, and have lunch together, and just, have fun in the park. And no, there was nothing PG-13 or R-rated that happened between us, just to be specific on that last bit I said. But sadly, that was one of the last times I ever really saw her, because she had a whole lot of issues of her own. Like, apparently, unbeknownst to me, she was already... Sorry, guys, another text came in. Anywho, yeah, like I said, unbeknownst to me, she was already with this guy who's, like, way older than her and I, and... Yeah, apparently they were together in a very toxic relationship, and she's been having a lot of problems, and apparently she feels paralyzed and unable to do anything about it, so unfortunately I can't really help her right now. And apparently later on, she got pregnant and had a kid of her own, but I think we've been reconnecting somewhat, but I hadn't really heard from her in a while since we initially had that date, and I saw her only maybe one more time since then, and that was about it. She called me up a few times, after I moved, and I've been trying to, stay in touch, but it hasn't been easy. Now back to my video game series for this year, starting things off with Darksiders. I have been wanting to get into this franchise for quite a while now, actually. Well, for the past, 3 or 4 years at least. I actually did come across it, or at least learned a little bit more about it back in 2015. At least regarding the second game, when I started seeing stuff regarding the Guardian boss fight and all that. But it wasn't until the third game finally released in 2018 when my interests were a little bit more piqued than they were already. I watched a couple things here and there regarding the third game, and then I'm like, okay, you got me hooked a little bit. Let's start from the very beginning. So during my free time in college, I watched all 3 movies made by Gamers Little Playground regarding all 3 games. Starting with the very first one, which is where my journey playing it officially started. Of course, it's always best, I was a little skeptical at first because I saw some gameplay videos from the first one initially, and it looked like it was all, puzzle-based rather than the classic action hack and slash. I was like, I'm not so sure, but then I looked a little bit closer at it, and it seemed to strike a perfect balance, so I was like, what the hey, let's do it. I actually picked up the first 2 Darksiders games on my PlayStation store back in 2020 in the bundle deal. And I also ended up getting the third one as well via PS Plus collection. Not collection, free monthly games. I decided to focus on the first two for right now and get to the third one later when I could, because at the same time, right around when I was finishing both of them, the other big titles that were coming out this year were finally releasing. So yeah, let's talk about Darksiders a little bit, the franchise as a whole. It is, to say the least, and personal note, a game franchise that lines up with me and a lot of my friends' personal backgrounds. It tells a story of biblical proportions regarding the four horsemen of the apocalypse: war, death, famine, and pestilence, or fury and strife in this universe. The narrative structuring is similar to that of an old book series I used to read called The Five Ancestors, where it focuses on one of the four per game. Darksiders 1, which is the one we're talking about right now, is the one that surrounds war, with number 2 being death, and 3 being furies, and 4 should be strifes. And there should maybe be like one more afterwards, regarding all four of them, if 4 ever comes out and the story's completed. So let's talk about the events of the story and War's connection to them in his game. Of course, the main premise is following proper biblical structuring between, war between angels and demons and all that. But there's also a third faction, an in-between faction. I mean, aside from humanity, there's an in-between party, or a third or fourth party, if you will, called the Charred Council. I guess they are, in a sense, purgatory, and in a sense, they are the enforcers of the balance between the 3 main ones, between angel, demon, and man. And the 4 horsemen are enforcers of their will. Of course, like in the Bible, the end war is supposed to happen when the 7 seals come into play and the apocalypse begins. This end war is only triggered by their shattering, and will only happen when the kingdom of man is ready and strong enough to face it. Until then, the 4 keep the balance between all the worlds. But apparently the apocalypse happens earlier than anticipated because someone from within one of the factions decides to trigger the apocalypse prematurely. And we don't know who until the end of the game, or towards the end of the game. So anyway, War shows up to do his duty, judge and cut down the wicked, along with his 4 brothers, his 3 other brothers, and 2 other brothers and sister to be exact. But most astonishingly, he is the only one there. Because of these dubious circumstances, everyone points the finger at War for starting the apocalypse prematurely. And the whole premise of this game is him fighting to clear his name and bring those responsible to justice. In order to accomplish his task, War must work alongside powerful demon lords, stick giant smiths known as makers, and whatever angels who are willing to cooperate with him. All while at the mercy of the Charred Council and one of their malevolent watchers, who is played by none other than Mark Hamill, surprisingly enough. The first game follows a hack-and-slash style of genre, along with some puzzle elements implemented here and there. Very similar to God of War in a sense, only more like the classics we used to play way back when, like Legend of Zelda or whatever else there was. I can definitely say that the Darksiders franchise is severely underrated and extremely awesome, both in its storytelling and its unique gameplay. And with each new entry in the series, it shines more and more, especially since the very first one's ending had us so hyped for what was to come next. And now we move on to Darksiders 2, which is renowned as the best in the series, and I can easily see why. As stated before, this game follows Death, the eldest and leader of the 4 horsemen. The events of this game take place shortly after the opening bits of the first one. While War is falsely and wrongly imprisoned, Death strikes out on a quest of his own to clear his brother's name. Apparently there's no real way to find any actual evidence to prove War's innocence, so the only real way to save him now is to restore what was lost during the apocalypse, by bringing back the kingdom of man. Shouldn't really be hard for the one who has power over all those who pass, right? Well, apparently it is much easier said than done, as Death must seek out the only thing capable of humanity's salvation, the Tree of Life that contains the Well of Souls. Death must journey across many different worlds to reach and obtain his goal, as well as dealing and working with the very same factions that War must soon have to deal with as well as confront his past and a fearsome new enemy, the corruption, an evil born of the darkness of the sin of betrayal. Which brings us to the new lore that this game has to offer us. You see, before the Horsemen were 4, they were many. Many of a race known as the Nephilim. unholy spawn of angel and demon. They were yet another faction alongside the main three of angel, man, and demon. They were conquerors, warriors of great destruction and conquest. Eventually they set their sights on the Garden of Eden. In that moment, the four saw the catastrophe that their actions was starting to and would cause. They chose to serve the council in the name of the balance. And their first task in their service was to strike down their own. They struck down every single one of their own, including their own brother and true leader, Absalom. Absalom's death was what bore their corruption, and thus a silent evil began to spread across the universe. Finally, after all of the obstacles and trials he overcame, all of the great enemies he slaughtered, and all of those he helped along the way, Death finally reaches his destination, the Well of Souls within the Tree of Life. But at the same time he is confronted with a very difficult choice. Yes, he can indeed resurrect humanity as he had intended initially. Since that day, since he killed his own kin, Death has guarded their souls within a mystic amulet, one that bore itself into his chest at the very start of the game. His arrival at the Well of Souls means he could also bring them back as well. Whichever race he chose to save would mean the condemnation of the other. In the end, Death gave his own life and those of his own fallen brothers to save what family he had left and those innocents that were lost. But his sacrifice was not his end. At the very end of the first game, the seventh seal was finally broken. The one that would call forth the horsemen to judge the wicked and truly begin to end war. It did not truly matter what the fates of the four were before then. They would come, no matter what, and a number of riders shall ever be four. Like the first game, the second stayed true to the hack and slash genre, but toned back the puzzle mechanics in favor of new RPG ones, allowing for things such as weapon armor and skill upgrades, like those from the first game. There is definitely a lot to love about this one. And as of right now, I can truly say it is indeed the best of the franchise so far. 4 to 5 fully explorable open worlds, 1 angel, 1 demon, 1 human, sort of, 1 maker, and 1 afterlife. Each one with plenty to do, whether it be new side quests or dungeon crawling. And even more with optional gauntlet runs as well. The combat felt more complex and more fluid, allowing for amazing attacks while also remaining somewhat simplistic for the player to easily understand. The story was extremely well written for what it was, expanding upon what had already been established in the first game while also building upon it with this one, with what it had to offer. We had plenty of amazing new characters as well as an equal amount of returning ones from the previous game. And we even got a little bit more all around with what every single one of those elements had to offer with 3 different DLC expansions, already added into the game thanks to this being a PS4 Remastered edition. Death, like his brother, was a really fun character to play as and to play along with. His snide attitude along with his dead tone made for some really interesting interactions between him and those he interacted with. In terms of negative criticism, I can't really say I have any at all. Wait, did I word that right? I don't think there's anything. I don't have any negative criticism towards this game whatsoever. But I will admit that there were some sections that I liked more than others. I can definitely say that the Dead World really stood out to me more than the other 3 or 4. Both its aesthetic and its music really stuck out to me the most. As stated before, I was thinking about trying to dive into the Furies game, but given that I finished this a week before another big title was about to drop, I decided to put it off for now. I will say I am looking forward to getting the chance to explore this series even further, but I really don't think my experiences with the other games will ever compare to what this one had to offer for me. And now we finally come to our very first major title of 2022, Horizon 2 Forbidden West, sequel to Horizon Zero Dawn, which released almost exactly 5 years ago. At the time of its release date, of course, probably a little off by a week early. So for those who don't know, Horizon Zero Dawn is an action RPG of sorts. It's completely open world and takes place in a futuristic sci-fi post-apocalyptic setting. Many centuries into the distant future, Earth has been reset to zero and is ruled by interesting machine-like animals. But humanity has not gone extinct, thank goodness. for they too have been reset to 0, living amongst the wilds in different tribes. Our story centers around a young flaming-headed girl named Aloy, who grew up as an outcast from her tribe, for she did not have a mother like they did. I guess back then it was more condemnable if something happened with one of your parents, because if you recall correctly from the Silent Hill movie, Alessa Gillespie was shunned and bullied by her classmates in the town because she didn't have a father like they did. So the first game centers around Aloy uncovering the mystery behind her origins and learning how big a role she'll have to play in saving the world. You see, what happened in the world of Horizon Zero Dawn is some megalomaniacal, egotistical, rich businessman by the name of Ted Faro created an army of robots. And he made all the wrong decisions one could make with an army of robots like that. They were self-replicating, self-learning, able to consume biomass as fuel. By the time someone figured out what was going on, it was too late. Not even the world's greatest expert in AI, Elizabeth Sobek, the heroine of the past, could stop them now. This catastrophe was dubbed the Pharaoh Plague. Has a bit of an Egyptian ring to it now that I think about it. In fact, anything related to Ted Faro has somewhat of an Egyptian ring or theme to it. But anywho, now that the robots were out of control, it was only a matter of time before they turned the entire Earth into nothing but a bare ball of rock. However, all was not lost, for Elizabeth Sobek had a plan of her own, one that would truly allow life to survive the coming storm. She created an AI of her own, Gaia, a terraforming system that would transform the Earth back into what it was before. Once the plague had wiped the Earth clean, Gaia would begin recreating the Earth as it was meant to be, being able to fully shut down the robots, clean the land, sea, and sky, and fully repopulate the Earth with human and animal life. The plan was a success, however a few hiccups happened along the way. One was Ted Faro destroying Apollo, one of Gaia's sub-functions that would educate the new human race. Another was a mysterious signal that turned Gaia's other sub-functions into self-aware entities. One of them happened to be Gaia's reset button, Hades. You see, if anything happened with the new biosphere, whether it be out of control or whatever, Hades would wipe the slate of Earth clean once again by reawakening the robots, and allowing them to do what they did before, so Gaia can try and perfect the biosphere. However, Gaia had a plan of her own to repair the system and save the Earth from the havoc that her new self-aware sub-functions would cause. So through one of her other sub-functions, Eleuthia, the one that was supposed to recreate the human race, she cloned her creator, Elizabeth Sobek, and that clone was none other than Aloy. As Aloy uncovers her origins, which I just discussed with y'all, she faces many trials as she works to stop Hades, working with the enigmatic Silence, a seeker of knowledge and the man who caused the incident with Hades in the first place, and many other tribes and friends she meets along the way. She stops Hades and the Dark Tribe who worship it as a god, the Eclipse, and save the world. Which brings us now to the sequel, Horizon 2 Forbidden West, which takes place almost exactly right after the first game. For 6 months since the end of the battle, Aloy has been searching. Even with Hades stopped, the terraforming system and the biosphere were still spiraling out of control. So with that, there's only one thing to do. Reboot Gaia and fix the system. She journeys off to the ancient ruins of a mysterious ancient human organization known as Far Zenith, in hopes of finding a backup of Elizabeth's AI. Apparently, Far Zenith was a group of people who were spacefarers. They were trying to escape Earth and the apocalypse and colonize on distant planets. After returning empty-handed, Aloy learns of Silent's deception and that Hades was not destroyed. But apparently he still had plans for her, and asks her to come find him in a mysterious, outlandish region known as the Forbidden West. Apparently Aloy learns a lot out there, and there's a lot happening at once. Between getting caught up in a civil war between two different factions of a tribe known as the Tenakth, and learning that the people of Far Zenith were still alive and returned to Earth as... how should I describe them? Superhuman astronauts, of sorts, with their own sets of robot and technology, and a clone of Elizabeth Sobek of their own. So yeah, Aloy has a little sister and her name is Beta. And there are many other mysteries that the Forbidden West holds for us. like a tribe from overseas and the true fate of Ted Faro. Fortunately, Aloy is able to accomplish her goal of getting a backup copy of Gaia, and finally destroy Hades, thank God. But now she also has to deal with rebuilding Gaia one piece at a time by returning its subfunctions to her piece by piece, stopping the Tenakth rebels who, like the Eclipse in the previous game, were created by Silence for his own purposes, and save the world once again from Far Zenith. Working with allies old and new, she's able to return Minerva, Poseidon, Aether, and Demeter to Gaia, along with defeating Regala, leader of the Tenakth rebels, finally defeating Silence and forcing him to surrender to her cause, and of course ultimately stop the Zeniths. Yet at the same time we uncover yet another hidden threat, the Zenith's own AI, Nemesis, the very cause of the signal that woke Hades and the other subfunctions of Gaia. It was initially a datascape for the minds of Far Zenith, allowing them full digital transcendence. However, it was deemed a failure and locked away, and of course because of its own collective consciousness, it gained sentience. It sought to destroy the Zeniths no matter what. As the Zeniths fled back to Earth to try and escape, they also led Nemesis straight to Earth. And now we await the second storm. I gotta say, with this game it felt like Horizon had a fresh new coat of paint. The gameplay didn't evolve all that much sadly, but it was still enjoyable nonetheless. And I really didn't have to make use of a whole lot of it either. The Forbidden West itself as a setting felt very vast and very diverse and very fun to explore. The story felt very weird to me, like it didn't really know which direction it was going in until like the very end. There was just so much going on between the Tenakth rebels and the Zeniths and everything else they decided to add. I can definitely say the devs and narrative writers had some very good ideas, it just didn't really have all that good execution. But the best and most memorable part to me were the new machines they added in this game. There was hardly a single one I didn't like fighting. And there's more to come real soon in the Burning Shores DLC next year. And from one big title to the next, especially when said big title releases a week after the previous one. And the title to come after Horizon 2 Forbidden West would be none other than Elden Ring, Hidetaka Miyazaki and From Software's latest and greatest masterpiece. To think that we couldn't get any better than Demon, Dark Souls, Bloodborne, and Sekiro. From what I know, Miyazaki collaborated with writer George R.R. Martin to help create his world and the characters for this game, and he's been wanting to and working on it for quite a while now. There's not really a whole lot of story to tell with Elden Ring, just given the premise of the Soul series and genre in general. Just a basic premise and some lore here and there, as per usual. But I will tell you what I do know. So the game takes place in a mystical realm known as the Lands Between. The enigmatic ruler of this world, Queen Marika, shattered a mystical and primordial relic known as the Elden Ring, which happened to be the embodiment of all order and balance within her kingdom. The destruction of the Elden Ring unleashed havoc and chaos into the Lands Between. Our goal as the main character is that we are tarnished, undying beings who are shunned and unwanted by the Lands Between. We were called back by a few others to find the pieces/shards of the Elden Ring, restore it, and take the title of Elden Lord. And of course, there are many different paths we can take given that it's open world, and as per usual, there are many different interesting and memorable characters to meet. There's Melina, your maiden/firekeeper for this game. Torrent, your spectral steed that you get to ride all over the Lands Between with. Sir Gideon Ofnir, the All-Knowing, your scribe and guide for this game. There's Rani the Witch, one of Queen Marika's demigod children and your potential wife depending on which ending you're gunning for. Master Hugh, your blacksmith for the game. Rodrika, who gives you spirit summons to use in your quest. Thea, the deathbed companion, fellow tarnished like you, who helps you by hugging you. The loathsome dung eater, another fellow tarnished. A cursed and despised being who wants to turn everyone in the Lands Between into an omen. King Morgott, another one of Queen Marika's demigod children who is an omen, was cursed and born an omen, and share a bit of rivalry with. Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, and so many, many more, including the very many adversaries that you will meet along your quest. Whether it be great dragons, fearsome fire giants, the golden lineage of Queen America. Oh, and we can't forget Blythe. He's not an enemy to you. He's an ally and also one of your greatest. From what I know, he's based off of Guts from the Berserk manga and anime, which Miyazaki takes a lot of inspiration from. Half Wolfman, Guardian, and Shadow to Rani. I can definitely see that Miyazaki pulled out all the stops for this one. The way I see it, he took bits and pieces of all the past Souls games and put them into this one. You have your uber hard tutorial boss reminiscent of Demon Souls. You have your classic Dark Souls formula with your HUD and controls. Aesthetics reminiscent of Bloodborne by adding different cosmic entities and enemies like Estelle, Natural Born of the Void, and the Falling Star Beasts. Stealth and weapon art mechanics from Sekiro, all while being its own thing with a fresh coat of paint with its own new adventure, own story, etc. You name it. There's just so much to do in this game. The Lands Between in itself is very, very vast and huge. There are so many different large regions to explore, from the basic Limgrave, the crystal clear beauty of Liurnia, the lakes, the decayed and rotten Caelid, the breathtaking Altus Plateau featuring both the capital of the Lands Between, Leyndell, and the rocky slopes of Mount Gelmir, where the Volcano Manor resides, the snowy mountaintops of the Giants, the crumbling city of dragons known as Farum Azula, the underground rivers of Siofra, and eternal cities of Nokron and Nokstella, with their breathtaking celestial landscapes. And of course, within each of these regions, there's just so much to do. Dungeons to pillage, great and memorable enemies and bosses to face, everything that defines the Souls genre and then some. All while changing up and advancing the formula. And of course, what would it be without the punishing difficulty that the Souls series is known for? Though in many cases, it shouldn't really be a problem for most players, depending on your playstyle. By being able to easily grind in dungeons, and using spirit summons to gank certain difficult enemies and bosses, it's almost practically a cakewalk. I can't really put my finger down on a single thing that was most memorable to me because the whole game in and of itself was a truly memorable experience. It took me a whole month, a week, and a day to beat this game. I didn't dive into it completely until I finished Horizon 2, but that did not degrade my experience whatsoever. There's so many great things to say about this game, and I'm glad it got Game of the Year like I was hoping it would. Of course, the most memorable thing to me and my favorite genre of the Soul series would be the bosses, and this game had so many awesome ones. Here's a game that I've been wanting to try out for some time, but a lot of people crapped all over because they said it was nothing but a ripoff of Shadow of the Colossus. But is that really so wrong? Do you know how many games have tried to copy the Souls series, or Pokemon, or Final Fantasy, Resident Evil? It's called a genre for a reason, people, because it falls under the same kinds of mechanics and gameplay that another game does. So I really see no problem with this one trying to do what it did, following a formula not seen in quite a while and not so often, all while trying to be its own thing. Plus it was only made by like 3 people, so please give them some credit where it's due. So the game I'm talking about here is an indie called Pray for the Gods. As stated before, it is a Shadow of the Colossus type game with Breath of the Wild mechanics in a sense. You play as a girl who is marooned on a frozen island, trying to destroy the false gods who are causing an eternal winter there. You go around slaying 7 to 8 different giants, each with their own unique puzzles and mechanics to defeat them, and perform the ritual to thaw the land. My only gripes with it were that there were only half of the cast of the original Shadow of the Colossus, and the way you take him down wasn't as fun as stabbing him with a sword. And there was really no reason for the Breath of Wild mechanics whatsoever. It was really a lot of fun. I love the design of the giants they came up with, and the unique and interesting puzzles they had for each one for you to take them down. Of course, some were better than others, like the 5th one, the 6th one, and the 7th one. The very first one was also pretty good and memorable too. All of them had really eerie and creepy designs, something that really stands out to me in video game aesthetic and craft. Between the time of all those different series that I just talked about that I was playing, I ended up going to see the one and only best movie of the year. And that would be none other than a video game movie. And that video game movie would be none other than Sonic the Hedgehog 2, one I was really looking forward to ever since I sat down and watched the first one with my family last year. Me and my mom went to see it together, and we both had a real blast watching it. I was really surprised that she, of all people, held it in such high regard after it was done. It was definitely the one and only I was looking forward to watching the whole year so far. And with that, it got me to start playing Sonic Mania. I got it off the PS Plus monthly games a while back, but had no real interest in playing it until after I saw the movie and got back into Sonic. It not only revived my love for the speedy Blue Devil, it also made me see as the classic 2D Sonic as the best era between the two. I was really surprised by how much fun I had playing it. It was just so much fun going through, well, most of the different levels they had to offer, both classic ones from the past and new ones they came up for this one. Not to mention some of the bosses, which is really something that actually stands out to me a lot in video games. And the way they had me collect the Chaos Emeralds so I could get Super Sonic as a power-up. That was really a lot of fun, especially reenacting the final battle from the Sonic 2 movie, where I turned into Super Sonic and fought the Death Egg robot. In terms of story like Elden Ring, there's not really a whole lot to tell. Or like with Pray for the Gods, either. Well, let's just say it serves as a prequel to the dumpster fire that ended up being Sonic Forces. The 2D Sonic of the past discovers the Phantom Ruby in his time and dimension, and of course must stop Eggman and powered-up versions of his robots from using its power. Classic bare-bones stuff that the 2D Sonic series has had. But that doesn't degrade the quality of the story writing at all. It's really top-tier stuff for a lot of retro fans. And then some. Right around when summer rolled around, thanks to the help of my friends and family and surprisingly rapid growing base, I finally hit 1,000 subscribers. Something I was aspiring to and hoping to reach ASAP. By the time I got my first 100 or so. I never really thought I could make it this far, and I just want to give a quick thank you to all you guys who have supported me so far and continue to support me, and I will keep doing my best for you guys no matter what. Oh, and I'd also like to give a quick shout out to my former classmate and now distant friend, Victoria Rodriguez, for being my 1,000 subscriber. Vicky, that was really awesome of you to come through for me that night. I cannot tell you how much it means to me for you to do that. A truly nice surprise. Well, after defeating Sonic Mania, I came to learn that all the classic Sonic games were coming to the current gen in the form of the Sonic Origins collection. And of course I saw this as yet another second chance of finally cleaning up some old unfinished business of mine from my childhood. I of course started with the classic Sonic the Hedgehog number 1, went straight to 2 afterwards, then CD, then Sonic 3 and Knuckles, because that's the order I thought they were in initially. But apparently, in order to fix the timeline, you gotta switch Sonic CD and Sonic 2 around. Apparently, Sonic CD comes before Sonic the Hedgehog 2. I explored a little bit of 1 and CD, but mainly focused on 2, 3, and Knuckles, just because those games were the best in my opinion, and of course, given the fact that the movie released around its whole storyline and all. Let me just tell y'all something real quick. It felt so good to finally kick the original Chemical Plant's butt after so many years, when my 7-year-old self couldn't beat it way back when, and of course get further through Hydrosity and the rest of Sonic and Knuckles and such. I think my time and experience with Sonic Mania helped me do that. And of course I did my best to be as avid and thorough as I possibly could to get the true endings by unlocking the secret super and hyper forms. I can definitely see that each game from the classic Sonic series was definitely a step up from its predecessor. And it was so good to finally explore some of my new favorite zones such as Oil Ocean, Ice Cap, Lava Reef, and Sky Sanctuary. Part of me did wish I got to explore Sonic 1 and Sonic CD a little bit more this year, but CD was just really tricky for me to figure out with its time-traveling mechanic, and some of the levels and special stages in Sonic 1 were just beyond me at the time. A couple of those weren't all that enjoyable to me at first when I first played through them in Sonic Mania. Oil Ocean in Mania was such a headache to get through, and afterwards I was just completely on my toes since then because of me having no lives at all and being stuck on Lava Reef and having to be on my toes the whole time. But going back to the classics allowed me to relax and ease back into them and find them to be very enjoyable. Especially since I was able to go ahead and take care of all my other business with collecting the Chaos Emeralds and such. And that definitely was a big help in allowing me to get through the game. And of course I can't forget the extremely breathtaking and memorable experience of finally getting to play through the original classic version of Sky Sanctuary. And finally getting to throw down with some of my favorite bosses that I watched online, like the Death Egg Robot and Mecha Sonic, and Knuckles to some degree. Though I will say I was completely surprised by how difficult some of them were. Like, Mecha Mark II in Sonic and Knuckles was just a completely different story just by being all over the place. Mecha Sonic from Sonic 2, Mark I that is, had its own fair share of difficulty, but only because you have no rings at all on that level whatsoever, so if you get hit you automatically die. But once you figured it out, it wasn't all that bad. Mecha Sonic in Sonic and Knuckles was a completely different story. I did end up beating him, but yeah, I did have a much easier time beating him, but just given how he was all over the place and it took a little bit to fully figure him out, I didn't perform as well, and that was a bit upsetting to me. But the one thing I never really expected was how blood-boilingly difficult the Death Egg zones were going to be, especially in Sonic and Knuckles. By the time I reached the final boss, I was just about to snap my controller in half just how much trouble and headache it gave me, you know, almost always getting hit by some unexpected surprise and having to navigate through the anti-gravity maze and such. And I practically had no rings on the first stage of Eggman's Death Egg Robot Mark II before, you know, the fight before the Doomsday Zone. So I guess I'll give you guys my full thoughts on this collection now. I thought it was really good and it was really awesome being able to fully explore the classic Sonic games once more. I found them much more enjoyable this time around. People said it was really buggy and there were a lot of microtransactions, but I didn't really have a whole lot of trouble with those. And it was so good to finally explore the story these games had to offer, especially the Sonic and Knuckles storyline that the Sonic 2 movie adapted and did a fantastic job of doing so at, while also taking elements from the very second game when meeting Tails and such. Now we finally arrive at my most anticipated game of 2022, the expansion to Monster Hunter Rise, Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. Really interesting, this one, actually. They didn't really give us a whole lot of new monsters for us to face at first, which is kind of sad given the game's new theme of classic gothic European horror. But hey, quality over quantity, and I can definitely see that's what they were going for here, and that definitely made this expansion, let alone this game, one of the, if not the best in the Monster Hunter franchise. So story here is a little bit easier to follow along with, so allow me to tell you about it real quick. After your main character, the hunter of this game, saves his village of Kimura from the Rampage, a catastrophe that practically speaks for itself with a whole bunch of monsters rampaging through the village, and the menace of the Elder Dragons Narwa and Ibushi. We are called to the kingdom of Elgato by Fiorraine, guardian knight of her country and sister to one of our supporting cast characters. Apparently Elgato is facing its own catastrophe. Mysterious craters within the region have been popping up. Monsters in that area have been causing trouble as per the usual premise of Monster Hunter. The sighting of the Elder Dragon Malzena, which is seen as a bad omen, for its appearance played a key role in the ruining of the kingdom in the past, and the appearance of nasty bat-like parasites called Curio, which begin to spread a deadly and dangerous plague across the land. And of course, it's up to us, the legendary Hunter of Kimura, to put these problems to rest. As per usual within every Monster Hunter game and expansion, we start off pretty basic with a low-level monster and then work our way up to the final boss. As stated before, with this expansion came very few new faces. A lot of them were variants or subspecies of monsters in the base game, as per usual with most expansions in Monster Hunter. but we did get a lot of awesome old returning faces as well. There were the Carapacian Crabs, Daimyo Hermitor, and Shogun Senator. There were returning flagship monsters like Astalos from Generations, Seregios from 4 Ultimate, and a real surprise, Gormagala from Base 4. Yes, that's right, the Black Eclipse Wyvern that brought forth to us the Frenzy virus has returned. And most shocking of all, there was Espinas, the flagship monster of the online game Monster Hunter Frontier that was only exclusive to Japan. And sadly, none of those monsters were canon or mainstream until his addition to this expansion. And of course, there were subspecies and variants, like Blood Orange Bishichin, Aurora Sumnacanth, Magma Almadron, Pyrarachna Kadaki, Scorned Magnamalo. Then of course there are our flagships for this game. The Three Lords, which is Sunbreak's own version of the Fated Four, only -1. And these monsters were created via inspiration of classic European and Gothic horror, as stated before. There's Garangolm, a gorilla-like fanged beast, reminiscent of Frankenstein's monster. There's Lunagaran, an icy fanged wyvern, reminiscent of a werewolf. And then, of course, there's our number 1, Malzeno, an elder dragon based off of none other than Dracula himself. And then there's one more, who's said to be Monster Hunter's version of the devil, Geismagorm, the foul and fearsome ancient archdemon of the abyss. Towards the end of the game, after many shenanigans of casual monster hunting, meeting the new awesome cast of characters, saving Fiorane's life from the plague and such, Geismagorm is the fiend behind the curio. It acts from deep within the earth, creating the craters that have been seen across the region, releasing its fearsome little plague babies into the kingdom to feast on man and monster alike. And when they return to their master with enough life energy, it finally emerges to wreak havoc upon the land. And as per usual, Monster Hunter, as stated before many times within the segment, it's up to us to stop it. And very fortunately we do. But is it truly over? Well, anywho, over the course of these past few months, we've been getting title updates with more monsters, more mechanics and systems, a lot of them returning subspecies or special species variants like before, such as Lucent Nargacuga from 3 Ultimate, the Metal Wraths, Seething Betelgeuse from Iceborne, a couple of new ones here and there as well, such as Flaming Espinas and Violet Mizutsune, and the powered-up Risen Elder Dragons, which are said to be survivors of the Curio Plague, learning to harness their power for their own, unlike the mindless afflicted monsters that we've been seeing. And now we have Chaotic Gormagala, Risen Teosha, Kushala, and Chameleos, and soon another returning Elder Dragon. There's a lot of speculation that it's Velkhana. That'd be very interesting if it was, but who knows. Given the silhouette I saw on social media, I also have thoughts it could maybe be Lao Shanlung, but hey, I could be wrong, it's just my speculation. I can definitely see that, like the previous Monster Hunter title that I've played before, this one was one heck of an experience and a really hard one to put down once I got into it. It's like once the expansion releases, that's when I just have a very hard time getting off the Monster Hunter bandwagon, because the expansion just brings so much more to the table. And I can definitely say I recommend this game and this franchise to anyone who hasn't played it yet, because it's really good. And if you really want to start getting into it, I'd say both Rise, Sunbreak, and World Iceborne are a very good place to start, whether you're, depending on what systems you have. If you have a Switch, definitely go for Sunbreak. If you have a PlayStation or Xbox, get World Iceborne. If you have both, try and get both, or whatever fits your preference. I also ended up collabing with another YouTuber by the name of Assassin, but I decided to cut all ties with him because he ended up being nothing but a toxic piece of crap. Him and his buddies on the Discord server he invited me to, known as the Hunter's Tavern. Word to the wise, if you ever meet him and he invites you, just don't go. It's not worth your life. Here we are again, taking a break from the games and jumping into an intermission somewhat of events from my life. I'd say a lot definitely happened over the summer with me. by the time July rolled around, like right after the 4th, I went on vacation to see my dad and my stepmom Susan in Florida. We had a real blast together. They got to see the lay of the land, a whole lot of awesome beaches and tropical landscapes, and the city was awesome. We went to a tiki bar that was named after our ancestral family. I got to meet their little dachshund, Stella, whom they treat as a queen. I got to meet their friends, Anita and her little dachshund Kobe. We went to the aquarium, saw the sights of the town, went to see Jurassic World Dominion together, which was not as bad as people claimed it to be. I won't say it's the best Jurassic movie, but it's not the worst either. Definitely had a lot of fun, went swimming, went to a lot of different beaches, got to see a drum circle in action. Really had an action-packed and awesome week with them, and it was definitely one of the most memorable things to me, and I'm really glad I got to see them. Shout out to my dad and Susan if you guys are watching this. I love you guys. It was really good to see y'all that week, and I had like I said before many times in this section, I had a lot of fun with you guys, and I hope we can do it again soon. And upon my return, I got an award from my job at Panera for superior customer service, which was really surprising and really awesome and stellar. I never for once in my life thought I would get something like that. Once I got back from my vacation, I finally got around to yet another long-awaited title, one that everyone's been waiting for the past 4 or 5 years. And that would be none other than the DLC, or in this case, the delicious last course to the new beloved cult classic, Cuphead. And I gotta say, with this one, it was one of the rare cases where I liked the DLC a lot more than the base game. Not that the base game was bad or anything, but this just took it to a whole nother level. The new island, the new bosses, the new playable character and her powers, and of course the brand new story, were just all in a league of their own. And it was very hard for the base game to compete with what this one had to offer. So it's like this. After defeating the devil and saving the souls of his victims in the base game, Cuphead and his brother Mugman journey off to a mysterious new island to help their friend, the legendary Miss Chalice. Apparently she has found herself a way to restore herself back to the land of the living. With the help of the jolly and well-renowned Chef Saltbaker, he shall craft a recipe that will be able to fully bring her out of the astral plane. But in order to make it, you must gather 5 extremely rare and extremely powerful ingredients, all from the most fearsome of foes that this island has to offer. After succeeding in gathering the ingredients, we return to find that Chef Saltbaker is not all that he claimed to be. He's an extremely maniacal psychopath who plans to use his recipe to claim the powers of the astral plane for himself. After defeating him, we save our friend and he goes to jail. Sadly, we aren't able to fully free Miss Chalice, but with her that's not really a big deal. And afterwards, in a very cute epilogue, we learn that Chef Saltbaker is able to go and redeem himself via his sentence of community service and help Miss Chalice in the end. And be friends with everyone. Like I said, this DLC was exceptionally amazing. Great enough for me that I actually prefer it over the base game. The bosses themselves, while still difficult, weren't really all that punishing as some of the ones from the base game. Some of them could be kind of grotesque in their stage or phase transformations, but also at the same time very creative. My personal favorites would be Glumstone the Giant, the Howling Aces, Mortimer Freeze, and Chef Saltbaker himself, along with a secret, interesting, special one they had with the Angel and Demon. Miss Chalice herself was very fun to play, and highly recommended to get through the DLC. The mini-games with the mini-boss fights were really fun. Truly a great work of art within a work of art. Eventually, I learned how to download and utilize OBS on my MacBook Pro, which allowed me to record and play some of the indie games that were made in my college on itch.io. One of which was a 2D Souls-like Mortal Shell kind of game called Don't Roast. It was made in my 3rd year of college in the fall semester, right before I got into the capstone program. It's a boss gauntlet game of sorts where you play as a little marshmallow fighting to save his homeland from the humans who are devouring and enslaving his kind. There's a total of 5 different bosses, and you get 3 different weapons to face them with. I always went for the ranged Cracker Star for the most part. It just felt very smooth to use without any actual issues. Well, I did switch over to the baseball bat for the final one, because it seemed like the only thing that could effectively and appropriately work against him. I think my personal favorite out of the main 5 of those was Sally, the little girl, who somehow had the ability to turn into some sort of ghoul. Yeah, creepy stuff like that always sticks out to me. It's just one of my personal interests. The second one of these that I played was Outgrown, a 2D Little Nightmares puzzle-style like game, where you play as a teenage girl trying to escape the toys that she's outgrown. It was made by my friend Alistair Sumstead from my 3D Capstone class back in 2021. He made this one in fall of 2021, along with his new team. And I personally had a lot of fun with it, and I even more so fully enjoyed it when I understood what it was truly about by the end of it all. We have more events from my life to discuss, and I really feel like I need to because the next series of events were probably the biggest, most transformative for me in 2022. So first things first, my aunt and uncle came for a surprise visit in August for my birthday. I turned 24. Me, my parents, them, and some of my mom's friends came to celebrate with me. And then out of the blue I get a major job offer from Tesla, which allowed me to move back home to where I was living initially before I moved back in 2020. Including, but not limited to, my godparents, Tommy and Cecily, whom my dad knew way back when in college. Megan, one of my former classmates and best friends in oceanography class. I mean, we're still best friends, but we're just no longer classmates. That's what I meant, just to be specific. Jacob, an old buddy of mine I traveled overseas with to the United Kingdom. Rudy, one of my close friends in high school. Hannah, my neighbor and best friend during childhood, when I was still living in my hometown. Charlotte, one of my first friends in high school, and who also helped me furnish my apartment a little bit. Ethan, another old buddy of mine, very artistic, very talented in what he does with his music videos. Titus, an old buddy of mine from boot camp. One that I happen to grow much closer to this year than we did initially. My most renowned and memorable high school teacher, Jedi Master El Maestro Humberto Perez. And of course, 2 of my dearest and closest pals from church, Dennis and Cameron, in order from left to right. If you'll allow me, there's quite a bit about Cameron I'd like to shout him out for real quick. One was the fact that when I finally got a new place, he helped me move in. I was staying with some family friends initially, when I first came back, but some things happened between us and we're not really on speaking terms right now. But that's a story for another day. Another thing I need to give Cam credit for is the fact that, as a belated birthday present, he got me a PlayStation 5, which was really grand and really surprising the way that played out. And I just want to say thank you, buddy. That both what you've done for me since I got back, it really means a lot, and I'm really glad to have you as one of my best friends. And you're awesome, and I'm glad I could finally be able to come back home to you guys. Also, at the same time when I got down here initially, my uncle passed away from pneumonia. Rest in peace, Uncle Don. He will be truly missed. I was fortunate enough to come say goodbye to him and arrive just in time before he left us, along with my aunt, who needed to go see him and be with my other aunt, who was his wife, and the rest of our family who was down there. So yeah, well, 2022 has had some very high highs. It's also had some very hard lows for us as well. I was also able to go back and revisit my old alma mater. I was able to finally meet one of my professors I wasn't able to due to the pandemic, as well as one of my old buddies and classmates and kind of lead in game development class. And I was also able to check out all the new cool indie games the next set of students were making in this semester. There were just so many amazing new ones that I got to try out. It really blew ours from the past out of the water. So many amazing concepts in one room, there was hardly a single one I didn't like. We even had people from Zynga come and show off their own game demo of sorts. There were platformers, turn-based, grid-based RPGs, kinky VTuber stuff for some reason, a Minecraft-like dungeon crawler, but not Minecraft Dungeons, survival horror that was based around the whole stalker concept like Alien Isolation and Resident Evil 2 Remake with Mr. X, VR demos, a Punch-Out style game, a Temple Runner / Beat Saber style game, a co-op puzzle game, a dragon fighting simulator, and a 2D Souls-like Metroidvania style game. It was called Interim and had similar concepts to the one I made way back when. only with more psychological elements, and it wasn't, a grid-based RPG. It was called Interim, and the kids who made it, they really made it look like an official game. They really outdid themselves with it. It was just so professional and so well done in its art style, its concept. I feel like this is something a more official indie studio would make. But no, it was made by a group of kids from my college. And with this, I definitely know for sure they're gonna go far with it. I also got to go to a synthwave concert by my old professor, whom I did the interactive music concert with way back when, back in 2019, before everything went to crap. It was really cool and really awesome. The young musicians he had this year, like the game dev kids, were definitely a step up from what we did in the past. I also got to go to a Halloween party at my old church. It was good seeing all my old pals from there, and I even also humiliated myself at karaoke. I have an entire video of it if you want to see. Right around when Halloween month of October rolled around, I did something very interesting. A live series of sorts, if you will. Me and an old buddy of mine from high school, Jeremy, we got together, went to Pinstack, and played through the entirety of House of the Dead Scarlet Dawn. He was one of the first ones I reunited with when I got back. And he was talking about wanting to be a part of some other friends of mine's channel, but it was very hard for him to do so. So given that it was Halloween month, and we both liked House of the Dead, and we both went to and liked Pinstack, I figured I'd do him a favor and have him try to be a part of my channel, so we went to Pinstack together and played through the entirety of House of the Dead as stated before. It wasn't really the best game in the franchise, but we still had a blast playing through it. It was very trying and enduring on the body, especially towards the arms and lower back. I'd say our best experience was just shooting up the hordes of zombies that were coming at us. Sadly, the bosses in this game weren't all that really well done. We had two returning ones from the very first game, Chariot and Hanged Man. Those two were probably our best ones, but with the final boss like the moon, all you had to do was shoot until you survived till the very end. Same with the second one, the squid-like High Priestess. Despite this one's lack of quality, I still had a blast being able to do something like this with a buddy like Jeremy, and it was really great having him on the channel that day. Now let's finally talk about some of the series I was able to play thanks to Cameron giving me a PS5. Again, buddy, none of this would have been possible without you. Starting off, we got the DLC to Resident Evil Village from last year, Shadows of Rose. It finally dropped this year in October towards the end. So this DLC takes place 16 years after the tragic death and sacrifice of our new beloved hero, Ethan Winters. After saving his baby daughter Rose, she's finally grown up into a teenager. She's been having some struggles in her life regarding her powers that were passed on to her via her mom and dad. She's been bullied a lot by her classmates, and she's almost under constant military watch. With the help of one of Chris's military buddies, she comes across a way for her to get rid of her powers and finally live a normal life. But in order to do that, she must dive into the world of what remains of the Megamycete, the source of the mold these past 2 games, and Mother Miranda's legacy. She journeys through twisted versions of the village, the castle, and surprisingly enough, House Beneviento, which was a big hope and wish for me for this DLC. With the help of her enigmatic guardian angel, Michael, she battles through twisted beings exclusive to this world that can actually suck the soul straight out of you. Cursed and mutilated clones of her, Donna's dolls and mannequins, an evil version of the Duke, and the surviving consciousness of Mother Miranda, and surprisingly enough, Evelyn, the main antagonist from Resident Evil 7. I will say it was quite a shock to see that crazy evil little girl once more. Through each level of the Megamycete world, she must confront her darkest fears and her past. Eventually, Rose is able to find a cure for her powers and remove them completely. And it is also revealed that Michael is actually Ethan, so they were able to bring him back one last time, and allow Rose to finally have closure with her dad, which in itself was very touching and sweet, and really brought tears to my eyes during my series, especially the section where Rose reads the letter from her dad. Never once in any of the games I've played on this channel has any part of it just moved me to tears and made me ugly cry as much as that one. It really hit home with me regarding my own experiences with my own father figures. Unfortunately, in order to save her dad and stop Miranda once more, Rose had to give up what she wanted and get her powers back to ultimately destroy her. But at the same time, she was able to have something so much more important to her. I must say, I thoroughly enjoyed this expansion. It's very rare for DLC to have almost exactly the same amount of quality as the base game and add to it in some way. Being able to utilize Rose's powers, as minuscule as they seemed at first, to their fullest towards the end of the game was really an amazing experience. It was really nice being able to fully explore the castle again, though I didn't care for it all that much, because personally my favorite was with House Beneviento, and I'm really glad that the devs decided to bring it back for this DLC. It was such an amazing and scary experience, just like before, being able to keep the same level of terror while trying new things at the same time. Things that really should have been in it in the very first place, in the base game. Being stalked by creepy mannequins of your mom when you don't look at them, and navigating through a maze of the house of dolls trying to kill you, all while being mocked, taunted, and bullied about your past by the dolls. These were all things that I was looking for in Donna Beneviento and her house initially. But the segments toward the end regarding Evelyn and the final encounter with Miranda and reunion with Ethan were really on a whole nother level for me. We had a much better, amazing, and puzzle-based boss fight against Evelyn, and the interactions between Ethan and his daughter were really touching. And Mother Miranda herself was not degraded at all upon her return. In fact, they really added to her and the threats she posed to the Winters. Cameron and I both agreed that the dollhouse was the best and the creepiest part in this DLC. And he doesn't even play Resident Evil, which in and of itself speaks volumes on how much it affected him, as well as me. I know I've been talking about Cameron quite a bit on this channel, on this video. I mean, and I'm not trying to overdo it or anything. It's just there's a lot that's happened since I got back and we've done a lot together. And this amazing DLC was something we both felt connected to. Before I moved into my new place, thanks to me finally getting a PlayStation 5, I was able to finally try out the remake of Demon's Souls for a little bit. It was a game I've always been wanting to play ever since I stumbled across it 6 years ago, right around the same time I stumbled across the entirety of the Souls series. I haven't really done all that much with it. I don't even have a full series up and ready. In fact, I'm still stuck on the second part of Stonefang Tunnel. I haven't even delved into it all that much. But as stated before I moved in, I was able to get started with it for a little bit. I played through the entirety of the tutorial and the first section of Boletaria Palace and the first part of Stonefang Tunnel. But that's just about it for right now. It was so amazing and fun to finally try out this game. It was pretty bare-bones stuff and basic and generic because this is where the Soul series started way back when in 2009. but there was a lot I really couldn't hate about it. Everything felt fun, weighted, and fair. It hasn't really been all that difficult initially, at least in the beginning bits. But that's probably because at this point I'm a Souls veteran. I mean, the Souls series is probably my favorite franchise of all time. I was able to have quite the amazing winning streak against the first 3 bosses, Vanguard, Phalanx, and Tower Knight. All on my first try. Sadly, Armor Spider is where that streak had to be broken, but I still didn't have all that much trouble with it. The level itself of the first part of Stonefang Tunnel is where things started to get a little punishing for me, but once I figured it out, it wasn't all that hard to do, especially once I unlocked all the shortcuts and stuff. And let's just say, as of right now, it's one of other series I've been wanting to, I can't wait to dive right back into and complete as a whole. This is where the Souls series officially began, and I truly want to experience it to its fullest. Now we've finally come to the very last game I've done a major series on this year, God of War Ragnarok, sequel to God of War 2018. My guess is it would have released last year to fall within the 3-year time span that Fimbulwinter is supposed to fall within, but I guess due to the pandemic and all, everything got pushed back and delayed and slowed down a bit. So yeah guys, this one was actually pretty good, and gave Elden Ring some pretty hard competition for Game of the Year. Well, I can't say it was entirely perfect. You see, for whatever reason, the devs decided to finish off the Norse Saga in 2 games rather than 3. Some things got rushed and suffered a fair deal for that. But at the same time, I can understand their reasoning. Like, with what they were going for, I really don't see how they could have spaced it out into like 3 games. But yeah, as much praise as there is for this game, there were a lot of things, especially regarding story, that weren't all that great as people claimed them to be. Sorry guys. Sometimes I just can't speak right. So yeah, anywho, this one actually kind of snuck up on me. Like, we only got 1 trailer a year since 2020, and right when the release date trailer dropped, it was only a couple months away, and given what was going on in my life, I couldn't fully pay attention to it all that much. So yeah, right around when November hit, I finally saw and remembered that this game was coming out that month. And I was really stoked, even more so by watching the dev diaries a couple days before the actual release ahead of time. And I also saw some of the leaks online. I didn't really watch them per se, but I did see like the video features of the thumbnail and title. But aside from that, I went in almost completely spoiler free. So yeah, the game takes place 3 years after the very first one. The very first one in the Norse Saga to be exact. Kratos and his son Atreus, who is now a little older and a teenager, are living through Fimbulwinter, the long 3-year seasonal event that precedes Ragnarok. And these two have had a lot to deal with since then. Kratos' former friend Freya, Odin's former wife, goddess of bounty, and leader of the Vanir, is hunting them for killing her son in the last game, even though Kratos did so to defend her and save her life. And Kratos understands and accepts her reasoning for that. There's also some minor changes that have been happening with them, such as them getting pet wolves, one of them being Fenrir, who sadly passes away at the beginning of the game. And of course another close friend of theirs, Mimir, Norse god of wisdom, is living with them ever since they freed him from Odin's imprisonment in a very interesting way. And there's also the small factoid that Atreus has been keeping secrets from his father, going on a quest looking for Tyr, the Norse god of war. Given the fact that Ragnarok is almost upon them, Atreus has been looking for a way to help his family survive through Ragnarok. And of course, also looking for answers on who he really is, as he's actually this game's version of Loki, the Norse god of mischief. It would seem that relations between the father and son duo have improved since the last game. But eventually, Atreus' actions and Kratos' desire to protect his family and live his life with them, as well as avoid going down the same destructive path as he did back in Greece. This would eventually cause the two to fall away from each other momentarily. Eventually, their feet would be thrown into the fire as well, as not only Thor, but Odin come knocking at their door. And Thor himself is actually much more of a complex character than you'd think. Yes, he's the exact opposite of what you know him to be as a hero in the MCU. But at the same time, there's so much more depth to him and proper reasoning behind his actions. And the way they portrayed Odin in this game was completely unexpected to me. Like, the moment he shows up for the very first time, you can definitely sense the dark presence he gives off. Like, you get serious Emperor Palpatine vibes from him just by the way he looks, the way he walks, the way he talks. You see, Odin doesn't want war either, like Kratos. And with that you'd think he's probably an okay guy, but he just wants to keep things in his control, and fulfill his own insane desires. After an epic battle with Thor, the two have no choice but to go on yet another quest to find a way to stop Ragnarok and keep Odin off their backs. And they have plenty of friends, old and new, to help them along the way as well, such as the dwarf brothers, Brock and Sindri, some of their dwarven associates in Svartalfheim, their home realm, the squirrel of Yggdrasil, Ratatoskr, Freya, who eventually makes peace with Kratos along with her brother, Freyr, and their allies in Vanaheim, Angerboda, Atreus/Loki's future girlfriend. Also, a quick note about her if it's alright. I've been seeing a lot of complaints about how they portrayed her in this game, and while I can understand a lot of people's opinions and reasoning behind that, I really don't think it's anything to cry home about. Just let me remind y'all that they portrayed Heimdall in the MCU almost the exact same way. Speaking of which, we get to meet him and the rest of the Norse gods in this game as well. Well, almost all of them. We also get to meet Thor's wife and their daughter Thrud, the Einherjar of Valhalla, the rest of the Valkyries, and many more epic beings from Norse mythology, like the serpent who chews on Yggdrasil's roots, Nidhogg, and the guard dog of Helheim, Garm, whom Atreus resurrects Fenrir through. And let's not forget Surtur, the fire giant who destroys Asgard. Even though this game fell short in some areas, there was still a lot of awesome things that we could do here. Like, we got to travel and visit all 9 realms. Midgard, Svartalfheim, Alfheim, Jotunheim, Vanaheim, Asgard, Niflheim, Muspelheim, and Helheim. Each were very unique in their own way. While not all of them were fully and entirely explorable, it was still awesome to see each one held in store for us when we reached them. Asgard itself was not at all what I had expected it to be. When you get there, it's these beautiful and lush green plains, sparkling blue lakes and ponds, and great columns of basalt like in the Giant's Causeway. And then there's the city itself, which is not a city at all, but just a plain old Nordic village, surrounded by a huge stone wall. And of course, Bear McCreary scores again in all areas involving his music. I think his best hits were The Hammer of Thor, The Allfather, and Svartalfheim, as well as Rabe's Lament and the collab he did with Hozier, Blood Upon the Snow. By overcoming the trials of consequence, trust, loss, compassion, choices, Kratos, Atreus, and their family are able to overcome, defeat Odin, and survive Ragnarok. Odin's goal in this game was very interesting, to say the least. He sought knowledge and control over his fate. He found a magical realm tear within his basement where he killed Ymir, the first giant, one that would grant him all the secrets and knowledge anyone could ever want. However, he could not safely look into it. The first time he did, he lost his eye, and that's how he became as we all know him to be. The only way to peer into the source of all creation was with a magical mask, only one that Loki could wear. Sound familiar, guys? Odin does his best to manipulate Atreus into working for him and using the mask to help him find the secrets he's so longly desired. But in the end, that lust ultimately turns against him, and he is defeated by the Norse god of mischief. Sadly, at the very end of the game, the two part ways. Kratos says goodbye to Atreus as he seeks out on his own adventure to find the rest of the giants that were actually still alive, but hiding all over the world. Kratos also sees that his second wife, Faye, and Atreus' mother, didn't want them to know their fate so they could make their own path. And in the end, Kratos learns that at the very end of this whole adventure, people would love him as a god of war, renowned for peace, just like Tyr. Ultimately, we do find Tyr by the end of the game. We did so earlier, but it happened to be Odin in disguise, and that Tyr cost us the life of our friend Brock. And his death caused his brother Sindri to change very negatively, which in itself is very sad. Speaking of Kratos' second wife, she actually does make an appearance in this game. I expected her to at some point, but the way they did, it was really well done. And somewhat unexpected. Overall, Ragnarok was a really great game. Just a couple things to iron out here and there. especially regarding the final battle, which in itself was a bit lacking. So as stated before, earlier last week I went up to visit my parents for Christmas, back where we moved to. I had a really great time with them, and it was good to be home and relax with them again for once. There might have been a couple hiccups here and there, especially regarding my flight back home, but we still had a really outstanding time regardless. I also went back to my old job at Panera and visited an old work buddy of mine. I promised I'd do so, and I'd also give him Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak for Christmas, because he's been wanting to play the expansion a lot ever since it released. And in turn, he also gave me Pokemon Violet for Christmas, which was really nice. So, quick shout out to my buddy Zach. Thank you so much. It's been good getting back into Pokemon. I've really been enjoying the game. Made a lot of progress with it so far. Thank you, bud. It was really kind and generous of you to do that. Maybe there's previous games or generations about Pokemon I like maybe more than this one, but I can definitely say Scarlet and Violet are a true return to form. I don't have a lot of my progress I can show you, as of right now, so allow me to give you a small taste of what I have here. I also got Pokemon Legends Arceus earlier this year when it released. I haven't gotten around to it sadly, but I have been seeing a lot from it, and let's just say I really can't wait to dive in when I can, hopefully next year. Other games that I've been meaning to play but haven't fully gotten around to or done much with would be Quake Remastered, which released back in 2021 of last year. I tried doing something with it, but I got stuck and burned out, sadly. It's also the second chapter to the new horror phenomenon Poppy Playtime on PC and Steam. I watched both Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 entirely online. I've been wanting to try them out ever since I saw them, but I don't believe I have a compatible enough gaming computer for it. I do have Steam on my MacBook Pro, but I'm not sure how well it would work out there. Then there's also the matter of all the bad rumors and speculations I've been hearing about NFTs and such regarding their developers and all that. So those things have been keeping me away for it as of right now. Then there's Sonic's epic return in his 3D era with Sonic Frontiers. I was a little bit unsure about it at first, just given how Sonic's 3D era has been these past few years. But then I watched the whole thing and I started seeing and hearing so many great things about it, so I decided to pick it up kind of not long after its initial release. I wanted to dive into it as soon as I possibly could, but given that its release date was like the day before God of War Ragnarok and everyone's been wanting to dive into that, I chose to do that one first and leave this one on the back burner. I wanted to get around to it as soon as I possibly could, especially before the year ended, but sadly there just wasn't enough time for me, but I'm hoping to next year. Probably one of my starting series, maybe. Then there's the matter of the Callisto Protocol, the supposed spiritual successor to Dead Space, made by some of the same people who worked on the original Dead Space and Dead Space 2. I was so stoked for this game when I first heard about it. Sadly, it was not at all what we had expected to be, and not in a very good way either. There were so many bugs and flaws in it, some of them game crashing. The story was rather bland and mediocre, and the combat and the way it worked was just not my cup of tea. Or anyone's, really. I picked this game up initially on its initial release date, along with an extra copy from my buddy Gavin, who shouted me out for giving me his, for me giving him his. And quick shout out to him, I really appreciate you doing that for me, buddy. That was really grand and awesome. I wasn't looking for any real praise, I just wanted to do something nice for one of my friends.
Before we jump into everything, I want to give a huge shout out to my buddy Colin for giving me this copy for free. As a gift, he came over and gifted me with a brand new video game, so I'm really thankful for you, buddy.
And of course the review he did on this one was practically the same as all the other negative ones, and fully understandable why. Like, the moment I picked it up, I immediately saw all the negativity and immediately returned it. Hopefully when the Dead Space remake drops early next year, we can just move on and forget the bad taste this one left in our mouths. So yeah guys, that just about wraps up everything that I did in 2022. And well, as you can see, another environment change. You are now looking at me inside of my very own apartment. It's not in the most pristine condition as of right now. I'm still unpacking for my trip back home, but it is what it is, and I did my best to make it as nice as I possibly could. So, yeah. 2022 was indeed a year. I could say it had a lot of really good moments. It also had a lot of interesting ones, as well as maybe a few bad here and there, especially regarding what happens in the real world, especially earlier this year. Yeah, if you hear any noise in the background, it's just fireworks, you know, people celebrating the New Year's and all. It is New Year's Eve that I am recording this ending segment for y'all. I still pray to God that's not gunshots I'm hearing, but, I mean, you never know, but nothing's really happened over here. I've just remained inside, comfortable in my own home, away from everything. I don't really go outside much or bother people. I just hang out when I have nothing else to do or don't feel like doing anything else. But yeah, guys, that is it. There's plenty to look forward to next year, and I will leave you with that in my outro for this. But yeah, I hope you guys, I know my channel got a little lacking towards the end, but like I said, I just started with my own life, and I'm finally back home, and I really want to try and focus on that as much as I possibly can, if need be. Like, you know, my job when I need to, or my friends when I can. Yeah, really eventful year to say the least. I'm hoping for a better one for you guys, for myself, and for everyone I know, and everyone else in the world for next year. And also, I apologize for rambling at some bits or getting mixed up in my words. My mental health, it's not really the best, just given my slight autism and all that. I tend to get mixed up in my words, and sometimes I might say the wrong thing or feel insecure about something I said, but enough about that. I shouldn't really be talking about myself all that much. I shouldn't really, you know, drag you guys along my mental merry-go-round. Sorry. But yeah, we are officially done and dusted with 2022. Can't wait to start fresh and completely brand spanking new next year. I'll try and have as many awesome series from all the big hits as I possibly can for y'all, as per usual. Like I said, there's plenty to look forward to. And of course, there's still some things that I didn't do this year that I need to focus on for next year. And like I said, I have my own life, so yeah, I will try and do that for you all when I can, and maybe I'll try and, you know, share some more of my experiences with my own life with you guys. So with that said out of the way, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you all had a very good 2022. I shall see you all next time next year. Peace out and Happy New Year!